What's up guys, my name's Brandon and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new iOS 26 features. We're going to talk about Apple's plan to win in AI hardware, several upcoming Apple products that just got leaked, why another Siri redesign is coming, a crazy AirTag story, and much more. And as always, if you want to continue staying in the loop with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure you hit that subscribe button down below and also check out the Apple Den Discord server. Okay, so let's start with what happened this week. So this week we did see iOS 26 developer beta 6 drop early in the week on Monday, and then we didn't get the public beta until Thursday, which did come along with a re-release for developer beta 6. So developer beta 6, public beta 3, those are the two latest. Those both came out this week. We did also see that re-release just to align the build numbers because the public beta and the developer beta typically will always have the same build number. And I've had some people ask me, why was the build number changed in iOS 26 public beta 3, which led to the re-release of developer beta 6. Well, the thing is, there's probably not anything noticeable that's been changed. However, the change that came with iOS 18.6.1, which also released this week on Thursday, might have been implemented into the software in iOS 26, this latest beta. And if you're not aware, if you didn't see my video already, iOS 18.6.1 did get released this week, and what it does is it brings back the long-lost blood oxygen monitoring feature for the Apple Watch. So now with this new workaround, your watch is still going to actually measure your blood oxygen level, but it's not going to show it on the watch. So all the calculations and everything now happen on the iPhone. So now if you go into the health application right here, if we tap on search and then we go into respiratory and then we go down here, you will see that we do have the blood oxygen now. So you can see my last one was last night. So I got 99% last night. I guess while I was sleeping is when it took that test, and you can kind of see it right there. Now what's weird is that if Apple did actually implement the feature for blood oxygen calculation in the latest round of betas for iOS 26, the beta 3, public beta 3 and developer beta 6 re-release, it wouldn't really make any sense because Apple did not re-release the developer beta 6 for the Apple Watch. So it still doesn't work if you have iOS 26 and watchOS 26. I tried it, but it does not work. Maybe with the next beta, it will work properly. I'm guessing that it will. Anyways, let's stop talking about that because let's talk about iOS 26 beta 6, aka public beta 3, and what is new in the software. So if you guys saw my what's new video, I did cover pretty much everything new, but there are even more changes that I wanted to discuss. And the first thing I want to talk about is the most obvious change in this update, and that is the fact that the animation speed is so fast now. So anytime I go into an application and go out of it, the animation speed is significantly improved compared to really any previous version that we've ever seen, in my opinion, way faster than 18, 17, anything in the past. Now, in my video, I said that, the app icons coming from a different direction as well. That was just based on the placement on the screen. I was looking too much into it, but basically it's just the animation speed that is greatly improved with this beta. And it's something that you're going to notice pretty much right away once you install the device. And after using it for a week, it definitely makes your device feel faster. Even if it's just the animation, it's not actually faster. It makes it feel like you're, having a better experience, a smoother, more quick experience with the software. And then something I didn't mention in my what's new video is inside of the preview application. So if we go into the preview app, which is new in iOS 26, we now have a more prominent preview button right there with bigger new document and scan document buttons. And then if we go into one of our folders, if we just go into a random folder right here, any folder you go into, you will see that we now have a new create document button down there in the bottom left-hand corner to easily be able to create a document inside that folder. Also on the home screen, I'm going to take this out of dark mode. I'm going to put these on light mode for the clear icons because it's easier to see. But now in iOS 26 beta 6, any widget that has a clear background now has that liquid glass design instead of the frosted glass design that it had before. So originally I said it was only for the batteries widget, but it's actually for any widget that has that kind of transparent background, like the clock, for example. It looks a little bit different than it did in previous builds because it didn't fully implement the liquid glass design. Now, speaking of these light icons, you'll also notice that they're not as bright, I guess. Let me show you what I mean. So if I turn this off of dark mode, so that's dark mode. If I turn this into light mode for the wallpaper, you will see that the wallpaper doesn't blend in with the icons as much anymore. I don't really know how to put this, but basically the icons are now more visible. They're more legible even when they're in light mode. When you have clear icons in light mode without having to dim the wallpaper, you can actually now see the icons. Whereas before, if you had a really bright wallpaper like this one, used to be pretty hard to see the actual icons, but that has improved greatly here with beta 6. Also in beta 6, Apple did add liquid glass to the toggles inside of settings and inside of first-party applications. So if you have toggles inside of first-party applications and eventually third-party applications as well, by the way, when this does officially roll out and developers implement it into their apps, you'll see this as well. But you can kind of see that liquid glass design there with the toggle inside of clock. And of course, this is very prevalent inside of settings since that's where we see a lot of the toggles. And here's something that changed that a lot of people were kind of confused by, but I actually called this last week in last week's Apple Weekly episode. But if you go into your camera settings and go all the way to the bottom, you'll notice that we no longer have that scrolling direction toggle to change the scrolling direction inside of the camera application. So if you guys remember last week and last week's Apple Weekly episode, I said, don't get too upset over this because this is a beta. There's a good chance that this toggle is only going to be here in the betas and will not make it to the final release. And now here we see in beta 6, it's been removed, which indicates that that was accurate and that we're not going to see that toggle in the final release of iOS 26. Apple was just trying to see, what people were doing with that. So if you're not aware of what I'm talking about, if you go into the camera application right here, in a previous beta, Apple changed the scroll direction. And then in beta 5, they gave us the option to kind of revert that scroll direction if you wanted to, and now here in beta 6 it's back to the way it's always been. It's just scrolling the way it's always been in the camera app. And I don't really think that we can talk about iOS 26 beta 6 without talking about the new ringtones, because this blew up more than I thought it would. So I shared a tweet on Twitter or X about the Dreamer ringtone just not having any business going that hard. And I still, this week, I played this so much. So somebody actually made a 1-hour version of this, somebody that replied to my tweet, which was awesome. I've actually been listening to that to focus. It weirdly works. But anyways, yeah, Apple did add multiple new ringtones here. Dreamer is my personal favorite, but also if you go down here, Little Bird is another new one that a lot of people missed. So if you haven't already checked out these ringtones, make sure to check them out. Make sure you have haptics on as well, because it just really adds to the experience. I'm somebody who always keeps my phone in silent 24/7, but this actually made me turn off silent at least for a few times this week. Now we have some crazy stuff that was found in the code of iOS 26 in terms of hardware products. We'll talk about that in a moment, but there was also something found in the code related to AirPods and the live translation feature. So this image was found in the code, and it really hints at that live translation feature coming to the AirPods pretty soon. Now, as far as overall bugs and bug fixes in iOS 26 beta 6, I haven't really seen anything super widespread aside from one bug that pretty much everybody is having right now, and that has to do with screenshots. So a lot of people are noticing that now when they take a screenshot, it's really dark. It doesn't look like it looks on their screen, and it's because screenshots are broken right now. But there is a fix for that. So if you go into your settings and go into general and then into screen capture, if you change the format to HDR, you will see your screenshots as intended. So SDR for some reason is broken right now for screenshots. I'm sure that will be fixed in the next beta. But as far as the overall performance goes with iOS 26 beta 6, aka public beta 3, I've really had no complaints with performance whatsoever. So I wouldn't say it's like night and day better than beta 5 in terms of raw performance, like when it comes to, not having any lag anywhere or anything like that. You still do notice some lags and some hitching from time to time. The device still does get warm because it is a beta, but again, the animations do absolutely make this version feel faster than it was before. And then when it comes to battery life, I'm sitting at 87% right now after recording for about 15-16 minutes. And you guys can see I'm sitting at 86%. I'm not sure what I started the video with. I always have somebody who helps me out and tells me what I started the video with, but battery life, I don't know, it seems like it is a little bit better here with this latest build. So I don't think it's a dramatic difference from what we've seen before, but it is a little bit better, I feel like, than before. Heat is not as, blazing hot on the back of my phone anymore either, like it was. So I'm gonna pull up my main device here and take a look at battery. And keep in mind, I've been using my phone a lot lately, my main phone, because I'm always looking for new features and changes on these betas. But you can kind of see here, whoa, that's weird. My today is exactly the same as the average. So there you go. I've been averaging 111% by 4 p.m. That's crazy. That's right on the average. But anyway, you can kind of see, what's going on there. If we go down to show all battery usage, you can kind of see what I've been doing it since Monday. All right, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So next up is going to be iOS 26 Developer Beta 7, aka Public Beta 4. And we should be seeing that next week. So yes, we are still on a weekly release schedule as of now. So I would expect to see that next beta early next week in the first half of the week. Apple did release these latest betas, at least the developer beta, on Monday the 11th. So there's a good chance that we see the next beta on Monday the 18th. But of course, it's Apple. Anything's possible. It could come at any day next week. But I would guess definitely in the first half, most likely on Monday. And then after that, we should see beta 8, which is likely the last beta until the RC on the week of August 25th. And then, of course, we have the final official release of iOS 26. It's getting closer every day, obviously, but it's getting very close within a month. So it's probably about a month away from now, maybe even less than a month as of the time of recording, which is insane. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And we have to start with a major leak this week. So in the code of iOS 26 Beta 6, we saw several identifiers, hardware identifiers in the code of that software. And this was found by Mac Rumors, and it's pretty crazy because there are a lot of new products mentioned here. So first off, there's a new HomePod Mini with an updated chip coming very soon. We don't really know anything about the colors, but we do know that a new HomePod Mini is coming. Also, a new Apple TV is coming with the A17 Pro chip. And this is one that I'm really excited for because I love the Apple TV and it's already super fast, but I can't imagine going from the A15 Bionic to the A17 Pro. That's a pretty massive jump there with chips. So we'll have to see what Apple brings in terms of capabilities with that as well. Because keep in mind, the A17 Pro is capable of running Apple Intelligence. So we could be seeing Apple Intelligence come to the Apple TV. And then here's another one I'm really excited for, and this one might actually come a little bit later than the other products, but a Studio Display second generation is also on the way based on the code finding. So we don't really know much about this Studio Display, but I'm pretty excited to see what Apple does with it. Also a new iPad mini with the A19 Pro chip, which is the same processor that we find in the iPhone 17 Pros that are coming. A new base model iPad is coming with the A18 chip, and this one's most likely going to launch in the spring of next year. Once again, we have another reference to the Apple Vision Pro with the M5 chip. So this is going to be the second generation, the refresh for the Vision Pro. We are still expecting that later this year, but we really haven't heard anything within the last month or so. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And then also in this code were mentions of the S11 chip, which are coming to the 2025 Apple Watches. So the Ultra 3, the Series 11, and the SE3 are going to have the updated S11 SIP. So all of that was accidentally mentioned in the code of iOS 26. And of course, this was all sourced and found by Mac Rumors, which is pretty awesome. So obviously a lot of small spec bumps, but also it's still just good to see that we have all these new products in the pipeline coming pretty soon. I would say within the next 6 months or so. But let's look a little bit further ahead because things get even more exciting, a lot more exciting than just a spec bump in the near future, because we just got a pretty big report from Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg this week that talks about Apple's future with AI hardware. So he says that Apple is planning its most aggressive move into the smart home market in the past decade at least, with some new AI hardware along with a revamped Siri. So he says that Apple is planning to release a tabletop robot in 2027 that's going to feature a lifelike Siri with conversational abilities, face tracking for video calls, and a design that's nicknamed the Pixar lamp. Both the robot and the smart display will run a new OS called Charismatic, which is designed for multi-user households with voice-focused controls and facial recognition. And Apple's even testing using the iPhone screen as a joystick for letting users move the robot to show different people in a room during a video call. Now, as for the lifelike Siri, this is honestly what I'm most excited for. He says that this is going to be able to engage with users throughout the day and more easily recall information. It's being designed to engage in back and forth discussions for things like planning a trip or getting tasks done. It's very similar to what we see with ChatGPT's advanced voice mode right now, which if you've used ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, I use it pretty much every single day. It's amazing. And I can just envision having this kind of always on in your house and just being able to freely and openly ask these questions throughout the day and just have a conversation back and forth with a robot that's sitting on your kitchen. table. I just think that's pretty amazing. Now we're also hearing that a new redesign for Siri is coming pretty soon, as early as next year, before even this tabletop robot comes out. And we're hearing that this design is going to make Siri more personable. Instead of just being an outline on the sides of your screen or a little, waveform at the bottom of your screen, it's now going to look more personable. And how is Apple going to do that? Well, they might be using an animated version of the Finder logo. Finder on your Mac, that little guy down there, he might turn into a real character, so it looks like you're actually talking with an object, I guess, not a person, but an object. And honestly, to me, that would work. Like, that would make me feel more personal and more personable to this thing that I'm talking to, and just instead of just seeing a bunch of waveforms. So I don't know, I think that a lot of people are going to like it as well and understand it when it's maybe something that's sitting in your household. This sounds so dystopian right now just saying this, but yes, Apple is planning an overhaul for the design of Siri again. But that's not all, because Apple is also planning to launch battery-powered cameras with facial recognition and automation features for household functions. So basically, think about your Ring and your Nest cameras. Apple is basically going for those markets. They want to have cameras in the house, maybe even a doorbell camera as well, and just be fully interconnected, with the HomeKit software. And of course, with this new Siri, it could work pretty well. So it seems far off right now, but at least we're hearing that Apple is really taking a huge stab at, the home product marketplace. And he does also mention that Apple's revamped Siri, aka LLM Siri, is going to be coming in the spring, as early as spring of next year. So that'll be pretty interesting to see, because Apple has not formally announced this LLM Siri, which is basically going to be like ChatGPT, more like ChatGPT, I should say. Apple has not formally announced this, so it'll be interesting to see if we do actually get that early next year, at least in the spring of next year. And I really think that that's going to be the start and kind of the kickoff for all these AI hardware products as well. If Apple can nail LLM Siri and actually put out a really good version of Siri, which has not ever been done before, it's been clowned on for a decade, then I think that's going to be a huge step in the right direction for Apple, and kind of everything else will fall in place after we have that, in my opinion. Okay, so now we have to talk about the cheap MacBook. So we've talked about this a few times in the past, but we're hearing once again that Apple's $599 MacBook is actually going to be a thing. And I think this thing is going to sell like crazy. So we're hearing that Apple's going to launch a new low-cost MacBook as early as later this year. And this report from DigiTimes says that it could start at $599 to $699 and launch either later this year or early next year, and that it's expected to have a 12.9-inch display and the Apple A18 Pro chip from the iPhone 16 Pro. So of course, that would be the first ever Mac that's powered by an iPhone chip. Pretty crazy. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the A18 Pro chip does not support Thunderbolt, so it's only going to have USB-C ports, not Thunderbolt ports, which I don't think anybody buying a cheap MacBook like this is ever even going to care. They probably don't even know what Thunderbolt is, but that is something worth mentioning. And then we did also hear from Ming-Chi Kuo earlier that this laptop is going to be ultra thin, ultra lightweight, and it's going to come in these colors: silver, blue, pink, and yellow. And based on this report, they're estimating that annual shipments could hit 5 to 7 million units, which would boost the MacBook sales by 30 to 40%. So yeah, I think that this $600 MacBook is going to be a big seller if it actually does come out. And it's pretty much everything that we're hearing right now, which honestly, for hardware, the more that we see leaks time and time again keep saying the same thing, it's more likely to be the case. So I think Apple's got a potential hit on their hands right here. And I think a lot of people are kind of downplaying and making it seem like a bad thing that an iPhone chip is powering a Mac. But that iPhone chip is extremely powerful. So I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. I think it's going to be plenty powerful enough for anybody who's even looking at a cheap MacBook like this. Also this week, we did get a new leak on the iPhone 17 Pro Max camera, and we're hearing some pretty interesting things about this, because according to Instant Digital on Weibo, they're saying that the iPhone 17 Pro Max is going to have the best telephoto camera of any smartphone. Now, Ming-Chi Kuo did previously mention that we're going to have a 48 megapixel telephoto lens, and it's going to be exclusive to the 17 Pro Max and not on the Pro, which would be a bummer, but we are hearing that. And we're also hearing that the upgraded telephoto camera might have an 8x optical zoom and also a moving lens, which would, in theory, mean that multiple focal lengths are possible, so you can switch from like 5x to 8x in terms of optical zoom. So that would be amazing, and the fact that we are getting a change to the rear design of the cameras makes me believe believe more of these crazy rumors for the camera, because Apple's able to do things that they maybe couldn't have done before with the previous layout of the camera. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time in Pennsylvania, a 71-year-old non-verbal man with dementia went missing in Pike Township on the evening of August 8th. So of course the family did call it in, and the Pennsylvania State Police were called out to investigate, and they learned that this man did have an Apple AirTag attached to his clothing. So his family put it in his clothing as a precaution just in case something like this ever happened. And now it says for the next 5 hours, police and the man's loved ones searched around for him. They checked on the roads, the wooded areas, pretty much anywhere he could have wandered, and they were keeping an eye on the Find My application as well, waiting for a ping. And then the AirTag did eventually ping at a neighboring residence, and almost at the same time, the homeowner did notice him walking behind their home. So the police were able to pick up the man and then get him to EMS and check him out, make sure he's okay, and then he did thankfully get returned to his family later that same evening. But without the AirTag, this poor man may have never been found, or maybe the wrong people would have found him and done something bad to him. So this is just a really cool example of a way to use an AirTag as well. So if you do have a family member or a friend or a loved one with dementia, I don't think it's a bad idea to put an AirTag somewhere on them just in case they are, somebody who runs away, which happens quite a lot. Anyways, guys, that's it for this week. I hope you did enjoy it as always. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. I make these Apple Weekly episodes every single weekend. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.